Interest rates, low interest rates, this is one of the many unintended consequences of Fed policy. What happens when they go up, as they're going to?
Yeah, well, your credit card payments are going to go up a lot higher as well. They're going to be going faster and faster. And you look at what all this debt that's outstanding and your payments every month, even if you don't add anything more onto your credit card, your payments are going to get more and more expensive. And at the same time, it's not like that income's growing really fast. So people find themselves just further and further in the hole. And if we do get a recession, which is going to happen, right? I mean, we don't go endlessly. This is a normal cycle. You have booms and you have busts. That's a normal thing to happen. When it does happen, how are people going to get through?
That's exactly right. And I'm ashamed to say that I and a lot of other conservatives had defended this crap for a long time, and we shouldn't have, and we shouldn't now. So I appreciate the overview on that. Thank you, Lenore. Good to see you.
Thank you.
That's it. Happy Easter on Sunday. Passover tomorrow. We'll see you Monday. Here's Judge Janine.
Welcome to the special edition of Hannity, President Trump versus the oblivious left. I'm Janine Pirro, in tonight for Sean. For the hour, we'll discuss President Trump's battles with the left and Democrats, his recent clashes with the fake news media, and his ongoing feud with 2016 rival Hillary Clinton. You won't believe what she said this time. But first, we're going to start with President Trump's legal fight against California's sanctuary state policies. According to the Los Angeles Times, California Attorney General Xavier Becerra today released a policy guide to schools on how they should protect students from federal immigration enforcement. Now, this comes after California earlier this week wrote a clarification to state and local law enforcement that its sanctuary policies do not give them authority to disregard federal immigration law, but they do limit how they can cooperate with the feds. However, this battle is far from over. The Escondido City Council, along with the San Diego County Board of Supervisors, may become the latest two governing bodies there to join the Trump administration's lawsuit challenging the state's dangerous and reckless sanctuary policies. Joining us now with a report from Escondido, California, is Fox News correspondent Griff Jenkins. Hi, Griff.
Hi, Judge. There is undoubtedly a backlash here in California against the state's controversial sanctuary new laws. And here in Escondido, which is within San Diego County, it is definitely the next frontier in this battle. We came and spoke with the mayor here, Sam Abed, about what they plan to do on Wednesday of next week, April 4th. They're going to vote on an ordinance that would formally join the Trump administration's lawsuit against the sanctuary laws. And we also talked to him about how that has impacted his small community, much like we saw out of the reporting in Orange County yesterday. Mayor Abed has a very strong message for California's governor and attorney general. Take a listen. What do you say to Governor Brown and Attorney General Becerra?
They are insane. They have reached the level of emotional state that is really affecting their own constituents. These two leaders in California, they care more about illegal criminals and protecting illegal criminals than protecting our citizens. This is a moral issue. This is immoral. This is illegal. This is unconstitutional, period.
And Judge, Mayor Abed came from Lebanon, an immigrant 30 years ago, and he says this isn't the America that he came to. If indeed on next Wednesday Escondido passes this ordinance, it will likely pave way for larger San Diego County to try and make a similar move. They are expected to do that sometime in middle April. While we were here, we also spent some time in the Los Angeles headquarters of ICE speaking to the director, David Marin, about how these laws are impacting ICE's difficult and tough work. Take a listen. You have this new state law, SB 54, and what's happening in Orange County. How is this impacting you? What are your thoughts on it?
Well, so the state law has been extremely detrimental to our operations. You know, California politicians have really tried to put ways out there that prevent us from really protecting the public. So what has happened is these individuals, these criminal aliens that were trying to get off the street, they're now being released back out into the communities to commit more crimes. Makes it difficult for us. When, again, we're not asking California law enforcement agents to become immigration agents. That's not what we want. But when they have somebody in custody that we're looking for, we're just asking that they let us know and they allow us the opportunity to come pick that person up when they've finished with their criminal proceedings.
And Director Marin, Judge, also told me that on February 23rd, a drunk driver, deported multiple times, convicted multiple times, was released to the public and killed a 6-year-old girl. ICE believes they could have prevented that had this law not existed. Judge?
Terrible, terrible story there. Thanks, Griff. And meanwhile, today in Washington, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Acting Deputy Commissioner Ronald Vitello provided an update on further construction of the border wall. Take a listen.
Let me be clear, without the President and the administration's leadership and a commitment to border security, the funding for construction for these projects would not be possible. In San Diego, we're looking at 14 miles of new border wall, getting rid of old, dilapidated landing mats in favor of a steel bollard wall. In Calexico, we're on schedule and on budget to build a new 30-foot border wall. Continuing east, we're on track to 20 new miles of border wall in Santa Teresa, New Mexico. In addition, we have 4 new miles of border wall in El Paso, Texas. Finally, we plan to replace at least 47 miles of dilapidated border fencing with new border wall system in various locations along the southwest border. The U.S. Border Patrol, sector chiefs, and agents in the field have been vocal about their need for effective barriers to deny the entry of illegal aliens and contraband. The truth is, walls work, and the data show it, and agents know it.
The construction of the border wall is a huge step in the right direction. And as Hannity keeps saying, it's something along with tax cuts that will help President Trump and Republicans going into this year's very important midterm elections. And speaking of the midterms, President Trump, during a speech yesterday in Ohio, issued a stern warning to his supporters about the upcoming elections. Take a look.
We have a very important election coming up, and they don't like the wins we've been getting. They don't like that the economy, the Democrats, they don't like that the economy is so strong. They don't like that they don't have one vote on the tax cuts. Not one vote. And we should do well. History says that when you win the presidency, that party doesn't do so well in the midterms because people get complacent. They get complacent. We cannot be complacent. We've got the greatest economy maybe ever. Maybe in history. We have the greatest economy we've ever had. You know the expression from, I guess it was Bill Clinton, it's the economy, stupid. Well, it is the economy.
And the president's warning is spot on. According to a recent Fox News poll, Democrats hold a slight 5-point lead on who voters prefer in this year's midterms. However, it's down a whopping 15 points from last October. Joining us now to discuss this is Fox News Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry.
Good to see you, Judge.
Good to see you, too. All right, so what do you say about the midterms and what's going to be happening?
Well, look, the economy is going to be better for the president than anyone expected, and that could be the ace in the hole. This is going to be a tough year for Republicans. A new president comes into power. The midterms are always tough. But the bottom line is the Washington Post just did this massive study of Labor Department data. No fan of the president, the Washington Post. And they went through the data honestly and said that the counties that the president carried in battlegrounds like Ohio and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania are creating jobs faster than any other counties in the country. They are recovering faster than anyone. What does that tell us? Number one, that this economy is strong. It's actually trickling down to real people, number one. And number two, that the president is keeping his promise to not forget about the forgotten man and the forgotten women. So that could actually break through. I'm not saying the Republicans are going to win. This is going to be a tough year for them.
Yeah, but Ed, when you think about it, the number was 15. It's now down to 5, the difference between Republicans and, I mean, they were predicting a slaughter.
Because real people are feeling the economy. Nancy Pelosi set this barrier. Don't anybody vote for it, right? As the president said in that sound clip. And so now no Democrat is on record for these tax cuts that are helping the economy, number one. And number two, Nancy Pelosi said it's just going to be crumbs. It's not really trickling down to anyone. Those numbers, the president's approval ratings coming up, and also the Fox poll you mentioned that shows that the gap between Democrats and Republicans in the midterm is tightening, is because of the economy. It's because real people are feeling real benefits.
And you know what would be very good as someone, you know, ran for office, I mean, to do an ad. My opponent didn't want you to get those tax cuts.
Right.
My opponent is not responsible. If he had or she had their way, there's no way you would have that benefit in your check.
And there's an ad that could be run that says that we promised, if the president and Republicans want to go to the American people, we promised we were going to cut your taxes, and we did it amid Democratic obstructionism. Not one Democrat in the House or Senate voted for it. And you know what would also be an effective ad is if you can actually start building the wall. And I think that sound clip from the border protection person is important. He's telling us something that people in Washington can't get their heads around. Everybody in Washington, both parties, think the president's going to build this big, beautiful wall sort of all at once, like in a week and a half, and it's going to be $20–30 billion. It's going to be hundreds of miles. No, listen to closely what he's saying. He's saying we're building 2 miles here, 10 miles here, and they're going to build this brick by brick, whether the Democrats want the president to or not. This week, the president tweeted this photo of prototypes, and I think BuzzFeed and other news organizations said, "Oh, this is an old fence from the 90s. This is not even a real one." What people didn't grasp is, and if you listen closely to that sound clip, that leader was saying that there was an old fence from the 90s in Calexico, in California, on the Mexican border, and it was all broken down. It was recycled steel. It was just a few feet high. And they're redoing it right now as we speak to 30-foot high bollards. Another way of saying 30-foot high bollards, Judge, is a wall.
Oh,
and so people keep saying he's never going to build the wall, and the president says, I'm going to build it, and the fact checkers say he's not. He's building it as we speak. Well, people don't realize it.
You know what, Ed? I mean, between the wall and the money in their checks and the deregulation and making sure that middle America gets their jobs back, it might not be as predictable as some think. But
and that's why it's tightening.
We appreciate your input. Thanks, Ed. All right. And joining us with reaction to all of this is former Ohio Democratic Congressman and current candidate for Ohio Governor, Dennis Kucinich. All right. Good evening. What shall I call you? Congressman? Dennis? Maybe Governor?
Dennis is fine, Your Honor.
All right. Touche. All right, let's talk about the border wall. You know, one of the issues that people have been talking about is the fact that they think that it doesn't really serve a purpose. And whether it's a wall or some other kind of construction, you would have to agree that 80 to 90% of the drugs coming into this country, irrespective of whether there's a market for these drugs here, comes from our southern border.
Well, we want to do everything we can to stop the drugs from coming in and to stop them in the countries that they're coming from. That's true. But I'm not a fan of the border wall, Judge. I think that it's a waste of money. They can accomplish the same thing with electronic fencing. And that, you know, we have bridges in Ohio that are falling down. I'd rather see the money be spent on infrastructure here at home.
What would you tell your Democratic compatriots to, or Democrat compatriots to go to the table and talk to the president about infrastructure and, you know, taking care of the bridges and the roads?
Look, we need a lot of money to do that. It's probably going to take a couple $1 trillion. And if I was advising the president, I'm not, but I would say put more money in it and build more. Let's put America back to work rebuilding all these bridges and roads.
Well, but I want to go back, Dennis, to the whole issue of the wall versus the fence. You know, what we've seen is billions and billions of dollars. I mean, I remember talking about a fence, you know, when Bill Clinton was the president. I mean, there was a lot of talk about building some kind of separation, and that just hasn't worked. And I was at the border myself several months ago, and I have to tell you, they have these areas where during the monsoon season, they actually raise these gates or fences, and, you know, the illegals can come through, and they all are tunneling through, and they're popping up on the U.S. side. I mean, you know, we've got to stop the human trafficking and the drug dealing. And I think that the thought that technology can really perform the same function doesn't make sense, because with technology, you constantly have to be watching it.
Well, look, you know, in our backyards, we have motion detectors that can tell you if a cat's moving across the backyard. We're spending all this money on brick and mortar, and I think it could be better spent. But the deeper issue here is our immigration policies. I mean, yes, we have to protect the border, but, you know, right now what's happening is people who don't have a criminal record are being deported. There's been an increase in that.
Yeah, well, maybe they're not supposed to be here, with all due respect, Dennis. I mean, they're being deported because they weren't invited. They didn't do it legally. And I have to tell you something very powerful, and that is there was a mayor who just, from Escondido, I believe, who talked about making sure that the sanctuary cities are protecting the criminal illegals. He wasn't born here. People get it. It's about our safety. Or am I wrong?
Well, I'm not going to say you're wrong. I'm going to say this, that there's a danger here of the federal government conscripting local and state police. The local police have to have discretion in law enforcement. Senate Bill 54 in California basically has stated that if we federalize the police, then we're going against the spirit of posse comitatus. And here in Ohio, we have a number of sanctuary cities. I agree with the sanctuary city principle. Columbus, Dayton, Lorain, Painesville, Overland, Lake County, these are all sanctuary places. And, you know, we want to protect people who don't have criminal records.
Who came here illegally. You want to protect people. You know what? We're running out of time, but I got to tell you one thing, Dennis. What is so frustrating is that for all of the dangers that are consistent with someone being released by local law enforcement, you would think that people would stand up for American citizens because it becomes a danger zone.
The ones who are criminals, yes, but the people who have not
how are they
going to
get them if they don't share the information?
If they haven't committed a crime, they are protected by the Fourth and the Fifth Amendment.
Really? Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
We'll talk about that again. Thank you, Dennis Kucinich.
Thank
All
you.
right. Coming up, Hillary Clinton is at it again after insulting half the country earlier this month. She's now making even more controversial remarks. RNC Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel is here to react as this special edition of Hannity continues.
And live from America's News headquarters, I'm Trace Gallagher. One Louisiana police officer fired, another suspended for their roles in the shooting death of Alton Sterling nearly 2 years ago. Baton Rouge police also releasing new body cam and surveillance videos of the shooting, where one officer wrestled Sterling to the ground and the other shot him 6 times. The July 2016 shooting caused widespread protest in the city that led to more than 200 arrests. The attorney for the fired officer says he plans to appeal the termination. The UN Security Council handing out serious punishments for violating sanctions against North Korea. 27 ships and 21 companies were blacklisted by the council today for smuggling commodities like oil and coal to the rogue nation. The blacklisted vessels will be banned from ports worldwide and the company's assets frozen. When news breaks out, we'll break in. I'm Trace Gallagher. Now back to Hannity.
Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity. President Trump versus the oblivious left. She's back, and despite being urged to get out of the public spotlight by politicians and pundits on both sides of the aisle, oblivious Hillary Clinton just won't go away. After facing heavy criticism for her demeaning remarks about Trump voters while in Asia, the twice-failed presidential candidate is once again lashing out. During a paid speech at Rutgers University, Clinton complained that the recent criticism lodged against her is because she's a woman. Take a look.
People saying, get off the public stage and shut up, which is something we're hearing all the time. Yeah. How do you...
Well, that began to happen after the election. Yeah. And, the election was pretty traumatic. I was really struck by how people said that to me, mostly people in the press, for whatever reason, like, oh, go away, go away. And I had one of the young people who works for me go back and do a bit of research. They never said that to any man who was not elected. But I do worry that what's happened to the Republican Party is that it's being held captive by a very small group of powerful forces. We have seen the power of the NRA, for example.
While Hillary Clinton continues to bash Republicans and play the gender card, her speaking fees are taking a hit. According to reports, the $25,000 Hillary Clinton received for the speech you just saw was actually $7,000 less than Rutgers paid Jersey Shore reality TV star Snooki. So, joining us now with reaction is RNC Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel. Ronna, that the press kept telling her to go away. Now, what I find shocking is they told her anything, given that she roped them off. Do you remember that during the campaign? She had them all roped off so she wouldn't have to talk to them. What's your take on Hillary and what she's doing in the public square?
Well, where do we start? I mean, she's so willing to play the sexist card when in reality, she is being treated exactly like any other nominee who would have continued to denigrate half of the country, who would continue to fail to acknowledge the failings of their campaign. And the other thing she doesn't acknowledge is what President Trump provided for the American people, which was a vision of more jobs and higher wages. And so by continually refusing to acknowledge the failings of her campaign and why she lost, she is hurting her party, and her party is saying, please go away, you are hurting us. No other previous nominee has put their foot in their mouths as much as Hillary Clinton has since this election ended.
And you know, what's interesting is we never thought that that Clinton machine would ever be confronted by someone as daring as some of these politicians to say, you know, maybe it's time for you to go away, or as I say, to go back into the woods. But Ronna, you know, the talk about the midterms in a presidential election, you know, first term, I should say, Clinton and this lunacy, her saying that the election was traumatic, you know, doesn't this benefit Republicans?
It does, and I do think the people who aren't telling her to go away are the Democrat leadership. We haven't heard from Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi, and what she said was truly insulting. To say that women only voted for President are against African Americans having jobs and progressing in our economy. That is so insulting. And so what she has said should be denounced by Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and these red state Democrats that we're not hearing from. Joe Donnelly, Debbie Stabenow in my state, Tammy Baldwin, Bill Nelson. Where are you? So it's interesting that the Democrat leadership is not distancing themselves as vocally as they should be from the very, very insulting comments of Hillary Clinton. In this election, he is delivering. With people getting bigger paychecks and more jobs coming back, people are feeling so good about their lives. They have more money to spend on their families. This is something that they're going to take to the polls in November and say, I need to return Republicans to office because they are delivering for me and my family.
Well, and you know what? It's not just returning Republicans to office, but those Republicans who are like-minded, like President Trump. You know, I think that the way President Trump does.
Yeah, of course. I mean, look at what President Trump has done in this year. ISIS is on the run. Our military is being funded. He cares about our borders and our laws. He cares about our judges, making sure they abide by our Constitution. And then just look at the deregulation and the tax cuts. 2/3 of Americans are President Trump did. He is a bold leader, and it is going to take a bold vision to win in these midterms. And we're going to need to get out there and make our case. We're starting to see those numbers close. The RNC's raised double the DNC. We are in all these battleground states. We know we have to keep these majorities because we have something to fight for. America's on the comeback, and we cannot go back to the Schumer-Pelosi dark ages.
All right, Ronna, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. And joining us now with more reaction is Fox News contributor and Washington Times columnist Charlie Hurt. Bruce. All right, Tammy, I'll start with you because you're sitting next to me and you're a woman. What do you think of this woman, Hillary Clinton? What is happening with her?
Look, this is a woman who spent pretty much all of her adult life
expecting to become president, probably put up with a lot with her husband, expecting he was going to be the entree. All of the decisions she made, she was told that this would be delivered to her. And really, the nomination was. And this tells you how the system used to work. And then that black swan of Donald Trump showed up. And the American people interrupted that by, in fact, remembering that they're the to a fourth act, which she can do, and deal with policy. And this is one of the problems. Look, she is harming the Democrat Party because she is complaining. With his global warming stuff, it's still about policy. McCain and Romney dealing with policies and issues that you can debate. Hillary is not doing that. For every woman out there, that this woman who's the first major party nominee is behaving so badly. We deserve better, and I believe the Republicans are going to deliver better for us and women. Charlie, when Hillary Clinton says no man has ever been told to shut up, is that the truth?
No, of course not. All of these people that have run terrible races and lost have all been told to shut up. But I could not agree with Tammy more. What is so embarrassing about all of this is that every single one of these people who went on to drone on and on, like John Kerry, and I didn't want to hear him. Talk about what a traumatic event it was. It makes you sort of wonder if maybe it hasn't even fully sunken in yet that she actually lost, and she's still tend to want to turn away and not watch it. So it's so gruesome.
And Lawrence, I mean, would you agree this is the kind of thing to discuss in therapy and not necessarily in front of the nation? Lawrence, your take. Anybody ever tell you to shut up? A woman?
I think we tell a lot of people to shut up when we disagree with it. I know on the right we told Mitt Romney. So when people, members of political parties, don't agree with past leaders that have failed leadership, generally we tell them to move on and let the new leadership. Too long the Democratic Party has operated off of identity politics, and they traditionally have won. And that was until Donald Trump came and talked about money with the American people. The people check. And so Hillary Clinton, being a veteran politician, didn't know how to handle that. She realized that her strategy, for once, the Democratic strategy, just didn't work. And I think it's hard for her to comprehend that.
You know, and Tammy, you make a very good point about, you know, here's a woman who was touted as this great United States senator, wonderful secretary. She's capable.
Yes, this is it. I mean, there's a point where we all make mistakes, and the way that we're able to move on and remake ourselves, or at least become influential again, is make a determination of what went wrong and what I can do now and what the priority is. But this is the problem for the Clintons. It's never been about other people. It's never been about policy, really, in the end. And this is where you see the kind of the nakedness. Not that we want to
Judge,
think
that's
of that
why
right now.
she didn't. Judge, that's why she didn't go to Middle America. She won't take responsibility.
I think that for young women, for women who are homemakers, all of us who wanted a woman to be president, we like breaking these barriers. Sure. We like the underdog. This can't be, and we don't want it to be, the imagery that is left about how women run for president and what's left.
That's a very good point.
This is why when we think about the next president, Nikki Haley, any of the other women, even Ivanka Trump, women who are dynamic. You might disagree with them, but the GOP bench is deep with women who think about policy and want to change.
I want to get Charlie in here. You know, Charlie, when you talk about what Tammy just hit on, which I think is very important, and that is, this is hurting other women now. It's not about you. So, and it's also hurting the Democrats. When are they going to get the hook and yank her?
When I look around and I see all of the strong, successful, powerful women in all aspects of professional life, they all earned it on their own. And what's strange about Hillary Clinton is she got to where she is because of her husband. And for her to then talk like she's this sort of Joan of Arc of women's accomplishment, and then turn around and denigrate all of the strong, independent women who voted for Donald Trump, it's kind of hard to wrap your brain around. And she really is sort of more the face of entitlement than she is of strong, successful, powerful woman.
Great conversation. Thank you all.
Thanks, Judge.
And
Thanks, guys.
coming up, the left is proven wrong yet again on Russia. We'll tell you why relations between the Trump administration and Moscow got even worse today. Stay with us as this special edition of Hannity continues.
More of you.
Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity. Ever since Trump took office, the left has tried to attack the president as being soft on Russia. But this week, the president showed great strength against Vladimir Putin when the U.S. expelled 60 Russian diplomats and closed a Russian consulate in Seattle. President Trump's tough action was in response to Russia's suspected poisoning of a former Russian double agent and his daughter in Great Britain earlier this month. Today, The Telegraph is reporting that the spy's daughter is, quote, conscious and talking. Yesterday, in retaliation, Moscow ordered the expulsion of 60 U.S. diplomats and the closing of the U.S. consulate in St. Petersburg. And today, Russia has expelled diplomats from an additional 23 countries. This tension comes as Russia's defense ministry released a video supposedly showing the test launch of an intercontinental ballistic missile named Satan II by NATO. Joining us now with reaction is Fox News contributor and syndicated columnist DeRoy Murdoch and the author of Direct Fire, former Brigadier General Tony Tata. All right, General, I'm going to ask you, since we're talking about that video that supposedly shows an intercontinental ballistic missile that they say has Florida in the background. Now, aside from their ability to do this and whether they have that, are we entering a new phase of a Cold War?
I think we might be, Judge, and I'd just like to back up and say that I think President Trump, just as he unleashed us to defeat ISIS, has done more to attack and defend against Russia than President Obama ever did. And then as we look at the missile that President Putin supposedly showed the launch of, that is attacking the concept of mutual assured destruction. And what he wants to do is to make sure that we feel uneasy about our ability to defend against the weapons that Russia has. And so we launched off a submarine a intercontinental ballistic missile this week in the Pacific Ocean. So Russia launches its
Oh, you don't hear about that as much.
Exactly,
oh, interesting.
Exactly.
Well, but it sounds like a tit for tat again.
Yeah, well, it's very much, and this is very much the almost war by proxy that we had in the Cold War, as you mentioned at the beginning of the segment. And this is through the elements of power, diplomatic, information, military, economic. You see spies being fired. You see information wars. That's an information piece.
They call it a spy spat.
Right. Exactly.
As I was reading, Dory, all the talk about the left and how the president is colluded, although after 14, 15 months, nobody has one iota of evidence. Is this going to hurt the left in terms of the midterms with the president being so tough on Russia? And not only that, Dory, he's got 23 countries. NATO, they're all backing the president. I mean, when Obama used to talk about it, there was no one behind him. Now there is.
Well, the left has been preaching this gospel for the last year and a half or so, that President Trump is a puppet of Putin and he does whatever Putin says. And yet you've seen, as you said, organizing this diplomatic effort to remove these I'm sure. Trump has provided offensive weapons to Ukraine. I think about a month ago or so, there was an attack on 100 Russian mercenaries in Syria. They're now
Very well said. Puppet. You know, there was talk today about two of our astronauts are on a vessel, on a Russian vessel that has gone into, I guess, outer space, the Soviet Soyuz. Americans on this Russian vessel or whatever it's called.
Well, you know, that's what I was saying earlier, Judge, is that this is information warfare. This is two countries posturing for power in the power vacuum that was left by the Obama administration before. You know, President Trump and his national security strategy talks very much about peer competitors, China and Russia. And as I said, he's done more to compete now against China, Russia, North dollars worth of 30 years of modernization of the nuclear weapon arsenal that we've got, that President Trump has laid out. So he's taken this seriously, and he's standing up to Russia.
Right, and he's got some force behind his words. But you know, DeRoy, Russia's acting like they're the victims in this whole thing. You know, that they didn't deserve to be booted. You know, I guess proved beyond a reasonable doubt. The daughter is now talking. She can, I imagine, tell us how the nerve agent was delivered, who may have delivered. Indeed, it is, as everyone is suggesting, the Russians who did this.
Yeah, I mean, we've had somebody who I guess the Russians may have wanted to be a corpse, who's now it turns out to be a witness, and she may be able to speak up and give this exact kind of evidence you're talking about. I think it's also fascinating that this case and other cases where people have been basically assassinated by Moscow, that they don't just use rat to Moscow, almost as if they want to leave their fingerprints behind. I wonder if that's something they deliberately want to do, maybe sending a message to others rather than just eliminating somebody who they find inconvenient.
All right. Hit sitcom reboot of Roseanne has already been picked up for a second season. Some of the mainstream media finally realizing that the power of the forgotten men and women of this country matters. Joe Concha and Charlie Kirk will weigh in next as this special edition of Hannity.
Driven by integrity. From America's News Headquarters, I'm Trace Gallagher. An emergency meeting at the UN tonight on the deadly clashes in Gaza. More than 24 people were killed Friday as Palestinians marched to Gaza's border with Israel. It was the most violent day in Gaza since the cross-border conflict between Israel and Hamas 4 years ago. Israeli military forces say Palestinians threw stones and against a border blockade. Also happening tonight, a federal judge temporarily blocking a move by the Trump administration to ban immigrant teens from getting abortions. The judge ruling that the policy violated the teens' constitutional right to have the procedure. The judge also allowing the lawsuit brought by the ACLU to proceed as a class action. No word yet if the government plans to appeal. If news breaks out, we'll break in. I'm Trace Gallagher. Now back to Hannity.
Dan, I called her yesterday. Look at her ratings. Look at her ratings. I got a call from Mark Burnett. He did The Apprentice. He's a great guy. He said, Donald, I called just to say ratings. I said, Mark, how big were they? They were unbelievable. Over 18 million people. And it was about us. They haven't figured it out. The fake news hasn't quite figured it out yet. They have not figured it.
That was President Trump yesterday in Ohio touting the huge ratings of the Roseanne reboot, all while taking a shot at the media for not understanding Right. And now, after ignoring middle America for decades, Hollywood may finally be starting to catch on. According to the New York Times, quote, Roseanne reboot sprang from ABC's Heartland strategy after Trump's victory. And just hours ago, ABC announced that it is picking up Roseanne for a second season. Joining us now with reaction from the Hill, Joe Concha and founder of Turning Point USA. Hollywood is so shocked. It shocks me that they still don't understand how out of touch they are.
Well, you know, it seems like ABC found a starving niche audience, Gene, and that is half the country, right? I mean, even Democrats and independents, they have to be sick of what they're hearing on Grace and other comedies where the same target is Trump and its political commentary dressed up as comedy. And I think it was very smart of ABC to go with Roseanne, an established brand. It was on the air for 9 years. One critic put it best. He said it felt familiar but new. But when you dig into the numbers, it's fascinating. Yes, 18 million people, highest in 4 years. But after people watch this, 6 million more than the Golden Globes. Then you break it down even more. In states where Trump won handily, like Oklahoma, 65% of the vote he got there. It's not even the top 30. That tells you everywhere where we are right now in this country in terms of polarization and the cities not embracing or thinking this along the same lines as the rest of the country.
And you know, Charlie, what's interesting about this 18 million or 18.2 million are the demographics. A lot of young people watching was last on. So what do we attribute the entry of that huge demographic, the youth, who seem to be so kind of targeted as
Well, look, Joe hit it out of the park. You know, you have an audience here that actually wants to see these kind of dynamics that they know exist in the real world. You look at all these other shows in Hollywood. It's just virtue signaling, sanctimonious, leftist dogma of how horrible President Trump is. Now, mind you, the Roseanne show, this wasn't like a pro-Trump commercial as some people in the media who played someone who voted for Trump, and they had real conversations. That's actually happening in the country. And the one point I want to make is if you look at the coverage of this from the Washington Post and the New York Times, they portray it as if different country. They've never met one, so you can watch this show to go see how the real Trump supporters live. It just shows how out of touch, you know, the elites are in both coasts. But look, this goes to chants for the Pledge of Allegiance that are patriots, and those on the coast that are like, wait a second, there's people that actually support this president still, and you can see the success in this show, and it really is amazing.
And you know, Joe, one of the things that this mimics, of course, is the election itself, the election of Donald Trump, that just as Hollywood set for a second season. I mean, the pollsters didn't get it in the election in 2016. They are so out of touch on so many levels, and yet they're tweet storm saying how little the success of Roseanne had to do with the president. What do you say?
Well, I think that this was a replay of the 2016 election from a media perspective. I remember right after the election, I heard a lot about soul searching, and maybe we need to get out to the middle of the country more to get the true pulse of the people, because we missed a lot of warning signs here as far as what people actually cared about as opposed to what they were told they should care about from the ivory towers of media centers of like New York and they still do the pontificating on their shows every day from New York, from Washington, from the major cities. And I don't see a lot of reporting. There are exceptions, of course, from the Pennsylvania
happening faster than the rest of the country. Maybe we want to report on that a little bit more and a little less on Stormy Daniels and Russia, which are stories, but there are degrees to everything, and the degrees on those are about 5 times higher than they should be.
And Charlie, very quickly, because we're coming up against a break, you know, the whole idea of Roseanne, the protagonist, being pro-Trump and then the other character, you know, being the opposite. I mean, do you think that there is a possibility of a show like this teaching Americans to start talking to each other again about
diversity there or political diversity at all? That's why people enjoyed the show, why it did so well. It's like, I can relate to this. It's real, it's authentic, it's true, and I've lived it myself. So it's really amazing to see.
All right, Charlie Kirk, Joe Concha, thanks so much for being with us. And coming up, more of this special edition of Hannity right after the break.